Hey everybody, welcome to the official first episode of the show. This episode, episode 0, we discovered we were going to do this. Episode 1, we knew we had a podcast, and then we're hashing out what it was going to be for you. It's meta. Ramin's art's meta is meta. We are like meta over-analyzing everything all the time and having fun putting new projects together and joking and laughing and having philosophical talks along the way. So we're bringing you into that world, and the show continues to evolve from there. So I think you're really going to dig it.
Welcome to the first official inaugural episode of Look Ma, No Meaning, aka Shane versus Ramining, aka the Joe Rogan podcast experience. I know there's already a Joe Rogan experience, but he was inspired by Jimi Hendrix experience, so he named it Joe Rogan Experience. We are naming it unofficially the Joe Rogan Podcast Experience. So just to clear up any confusion, let's see. How's it going today?
No confusion so far. I think we're all, I think we have it all figured out.
Excellent.
And you have our, the hosts for the Look Ma No Meaning podcast are Ramin Nazer.
And Shane Mauss, as seen on Conan, Amazon Prime, Netflix, before Netflix took off like half of their shows and replaced it with like, I don't know.
Quality content?
Yeah, high quality content. I didn't even get to actually make up a fake show of what it was, in case that was interpreted as that at all. And let's see, we're one day after MLK Day as this is being recorded, and it's the day before the inauguration. So anything that we miss in regards to what goes, if half of the country blows up tomorrow and we're not talking about it, this is why. It's because we didn't hear about it yet.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it doesn't, though.
Yeah, hopefully it's not blown up by the time people are listening to this. But I think that this will be the perfect podcast for someone who is, just trying to make their way through the Mad Max-ish hellscape that is the potential future that we have, that we can't imagine right now, but they are in fact experiencing. Yeah. And they're probably listening and going, man, those guys had no idea what was going to happen now, but we got you, because much of this podcast is kind of going to be about exploring motivation, exploring meaning, how we make sense of this experience we call life. And so you might be down and out in your weird new tribe of trans white supremacists.
There's gotta be one, right? There's gotta be a trans white supremacist.
Oh yeah.
There's gotta be some. There's some of everything. There's a vegan Trump supporter with like 100,000 listeners. He wears the MAGA hat. He's vegan, and he looks like the just typical liberal guy. But it's like, look, man, I'm just against the wars, and Trump is the only guy who wasn't starting new wars, and the tax plan. So he's just found that little niche of that. But who knows? Maybe he actually believes in it. But oftentimes, I feel like so many of these people are like, wait a minute, most of the people that look like me believe in this. If I did the opposite, I would be the only gay black Trump support or whatever.
That's how the Proud Boys started, like a hipster in Brooklyn that was like,
really,
these snowflakes need to, I don't know enough about the guy, so but let's just take that as fact that it was some sort of like hipster thing that started like kind of as a joke in Brooklyn, and then I think might have got out of hand.
How can he be racist? He's 1/25th Mexican. Gotcha.
Man, now I want to talk about war. So I guess to set things
talk
up,
about it.
let's talk about the wars and how to end them, or start some new ones.
Speaking of motivation, so I always talk about how I love both sides of the motivation coin, and not like it depending on what mood you're in. But there's the side of the coin that's like, you don't have to work, you just have to get in touch with the universe, and the universe gives it to you if you're just in vibrational resonance with the universe. You don't have to work hard, you just imagine what you want, and then it'll be delivered to you. And then there's the other side of the coin, which is like, the universe ain't going to give you shit. It's you have to get up every day at 4 a.m. and grind and hustle and stay hard. And there's this ex-Navy SEAL I like to listen to sometimes called Jocko Willink. I don't know if you know him.
He puts like a picture of his watch like every morning when he wakes up, like 4:02. Slept in today, but I'm gonna get after it.
Yeah, and he'll because this is his world, like he was born to be a commando and to go to war, like regardless of whether there was wars going on. Thank goodness there was one, otherwise who knows what he would be doing with his time. But every metaphor is like, if you're not working hard, the enemy is currently planning against you, so you have to be working twice as hard because your enemy is working while you sleep. And like just when you think it's time to rest, wrong, because the enemy is work. And it's like all about like war metaphors. And sometimes I get in that mode. I'm like, wait a minute, why am I all worry all of a sudden? I'm not at war.
I love this new wave of deeply paranoid Tony Robbins bros. we all like had a good laugh at Tony Robbins, and that for like no reason really other than like his voice was weird, and like motivational speaking is like can be a little silly. And
anything that takes place in a hotel conference convention center room we're allowed to make fun of, because you're in look at the carpet, look at the decorations on the wall, look at the admission fees.
I know. So
we gotta make fun of it.
I take that back. Everything is funny about Tony Robbins, but in addition to that, you give that guy a bazooka, even funnier to me. Like, I don't need to, like, how to get ripped through paranoia. I watched American History X. I get that super angry people can get jacked.
Fitness is one of those things that it's like, it's kind of taunting in that like you see some of the stupidest people in the world get really good at it.
Yeah.
You're like, well, if I'm so smart, how come I can't like motivate myself to get into shape for more than a week? And
well, don't you think it's like kind of just like fitness nerds more like first off, I certainly wish that I was in better shape than I am. I'm in okay shape. And 2020, I've started taking a lot better care of myself.
I thought you were going to say start taking keto courses.
I started taking keto courses.
Are you keto? No, I'm still in level 1. You have to go. It's like improv. You have to make it to level 5 before you can talk to Amy Poehler or whatever.
Well, let me say this. Like, I watched this thing. I don't know why I never watched stuff like this, but I watched this YouTube video that was this old, like, mini documentary about Arnold Schwarzenegger back when he was like getting ready for one of his Mr. Universe, like before he was an actor or anything. And he was like looking in the mirror, and he's like, you need to take a hard look in the mirror and really look at yourself and like analyze with scrutiny each muscle, and it was the first time that I was like, oh, that's why they're looking in the mirror. It's not always like this vanity thing. It's like, oh, I need to like really be honest with myself and have like a hard look in the mirror at this like very particular muscle that I'm like, or see which muscle groups I need to work on or whatever. That's a great approach. I think we all need to like take hard looks in mirrors at like our own psyches and our work ethics and everything else in life. But the thing is like, you could say to any of these guys, you could be like, well, what's the difference between where you're at in like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mr. Universe? The difference is you don't have 12 hours a day to spend in the gym, like nerding out on every single little muscle group. And you probably have other interests, you know?
Yeah, it's like mastery always comes down to fractions of a percentage where like we can't tell the difference between the person who's ranked, you know, Mr. Universe #1 and Mr. Universe number 100 or something. But to them, it's like, oh, he's got so much more flab compared to number 100.
And so to me, it seems like there's diminishing returns. Like I'm not for like, hey, let's exercise. I used to be so against jocks that I was like, I wish I wouldn't have been as adverse to exercise and taking better care of myself as I had been much of my life. But I'm interested in being like a C student at things. Like I want to be able to take a quiz in any like science 101 course and get a C. You know, like I don't need an A, and I certainly don't like the difference between an A and an A plus is like, what are you doing with your life? Now you're just a nerd. You're just like obsessing.
Yeah.
You know? And so that to see the wellness people that then like get artificially, no one should be as ripped as Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like no human was ever that ripped. Humans didn't evolve to be that ripped. We didn't evolve for our muscles. Any chimp can take Arnold Schwarzenegger at any peak of his life and destroy him like easily. They'll rip his face off and his balls and
the like, oldest, weakest female chimp can rip. Have you seen that video of there's like these 12, I might be exaggerating, but not really. There's like 12 Nordic big strongman looking guys tugging on this tug of war. And like, it's like the camera is panning towards the other side and you're expecting to see 12 other Nordic guys. And it's just one chimp with one of its arms barely trying. That's not even most of what it's doing. And it's giving these guys the ride of their life. And it shows that, yeah, even this kind of weak looking chimp, it's just built for physicality. And we've left the realm of physicality, beyond 35,000 years ago. When did we leave hunter-gatherer tribes? I've got Sapiens right there, and I've got Sapiens Illustrated right there too. For those of you who can't read the actual one, such as me.
I should get the illustrated one. That sounds awesome. The original book is terrific. I mean, they say like 10,000 years ago was when things really started. Agriculture started taking off. It depends on what place of the world. You could, I mean, he makes the case in Sapiens that it was around 75,000 years ago that humans started like really working together cooperatively and building larger and larger, like the tribe size expanded. I think that's iffy. That timeline that he gives in that book is a little bit iffy, but the ideas within it are there. But yeah, that's, I mean, there's trade-offs in everything. And definitely humans did not evolve their muscles. Like it's nice to have muscles and like, and there's like, you know, there's frogs that advertise their strength to females and stuff too. But you don't look at that frog and be like, whoa, that frog is
ripped.
Really, it's riveted. Um, so, like, if you want to nerd out to like getting that strong, fine. But like to look stronger than an NFL all-star, like clearly there's no utility in that muscle. Clearly that's like just for looks.
Yeah.
If if the NBA or NFL pro player that's in the most elite this and that, if you're bigger than like Michael Phelps, then it looks cool.
Or like with you ever see arm wrestling where one person is clearly looks bigger than the other, but for whatever reason, the other person is better at arm wrestling. They've just either worked out the mechanics of how to shift back and forth, or they're just focused in one like part of the bicep. And you're like, how did they do that? Muscle looking strong means nothing, I guess.
I'm into rock climbing. I kind of fell out of it.
Literally.
Then especially COVID.
Did you mean to say that? Yeah, you did.
No.
You riveted earlier, so you meant to say you fell out of it. Check out My Big Break on Apple Podcasts. No, not on Podcasts. Apple iTunes Store or Spotify, whichever one gives you more money.
That's my first that was my first album combining science that I enjoy, or my first like recorded thing where I was like, yes, I can do science and comedy in a successful way.
What about Mating Season? Or Mating Season you don't think was success?
No, it was too much of a compromise. I was trying to do jokes about evolution that would work in like a rowdy comedy club in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and you so think that having like a big dick is evolved, but it's actually a small dick that's evolved, according to Dr. Marty Hazel.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had good intentions. It was nice to try to be like, hey, let me see if I can do science for people that don't want to hear about science. Now I'm like, I mean, the reason why I do specialized shows now is because I wouldn't want to go into a comedy club and the headliner just does 45 minutes of football jokes. And I wasn't told that it's like, oh, this guy is a football comedian and all his jokes are about football. Like that's great if someone does that and bills that show as that, and football fans can come out and see that comedy show. That's awesome.
You know, when you're sitting at the 45 line, you know, when you're sitting at the 45-yard line and you run out of nachos, and then Bill Belichick comes up and gives you Tom Landry's hat. I don't think any of those are actually football references. Maybe some of them are. Yeah, and it's beyond, like, it's not cute to make fun of sports ball. Like, for a while, the internet was like, oh, it's the sports ball finals today. And like, shut up, you nerd.
The internet was like making fun of sports or something?
Yeah, at some pivotal peak thing and of course there's no way to actually describe the internet as doing one thing at any time. It's always doing unlimited things. And it's never about one focused thing. It's always one side and the other side and the people who don't want anything to do with the both sidesism and the people that are too focused on themselves to even notice anything was going on at all. But just the typical, like, oh, why does college care about sports when they should be caring about education? Which all of these are fantastic points, but sports exists for a reason. We have to be at warring tribes and, conquer the other territory, plant your seed in the other sides. Like the whole raping and pillaging thing has transferred into sports where you're literally like taking your seed and dunking it into the other hole. I know this is just one Freudian way of looking at it, but it is like this ball that holds the power and then you're driving it into the enemy territory. And so it is like kind of very seed spreading like that.
Yeah, I definitely think that sports evolved as like a way to like play fight I think the early sports were more like wrestling and stuff like that. To like, we'll get ready to go out on the battlefield, and then women would come around and be like, all right, well, I better get with the one that's going to be the best out on the battlefield because he's going to be around to hang out with the kid for longer.
Yeah, it's not even a thought. It's just kind of like how it plays out in your short life.
Yeah, that's an important thing that we should. I was thinking at some point we should have an episode just explaining the basics of evolution and how things like that work, because it's mostly a blind process where, say at that time, the female selects for a guy that does better in a battle, when battling is part of the condition of the environment, which I think is probably overplayed aspect of human history, but certainly it was there. And then say she just found herself attracted to those sorts of traits, and there was all sorts of other women attracted to all sorts of different traits, but her offspring that either had those traits or were protected by those traits tended to pass on her genes. So say there was utility in a guy that was great at the wrestling competition, and that was this indicator that he was going to survive battles better as well, or command some respect or have status or whatever. There's a lot of things that would maybe help the offspring with that. Maybe the offspring would get more resources, maybe it would have a dad for longer, maybe it would have some of those genes to make it tough, or maybe it would be like the female that would get that same preference for that type of dude. And so it's much more like that than the way that I presented it, of like, oh, maybe he'll go off. That's me like anthropomorphizing the blind watchmaker that is evolution.
What if it is the blind watchmaker? Also, were we going to talk about this is the official first episode, I think, not to be confused with episode 0, but should we talk about what the title of this show is and what we think meaning is, and are we going to do it like in a courtroom where we each have our own side? And because I was thinking like this, I don't know what this comedy dynamic is, because you and I've got something. I don't know what it is. It's not straight man and goofy man, and it's not the guy and the gal or something, and it's not the serious and the not serious, but there's something to it. So
I just think that we're compatible. I actually think that, I think that one thing that sports does wrong is creates this like idea of two sides and a zero-sum game, and like one side wins, one side loses, and whoever won is also the best, and it's a perfect meritocracy. And I think that we build on each other by having different traits and strengths and weaknesses that play off each other really well. And we've been friends for how long now? Like 10 years?
Over a decade, I think. Yeah, I think 2009. I have to go back and look and see where it starts, because initially, like, here's our journey so far. We're comedian friends while you live in Austin and I also live in Austin. And we see each other at Cap City or Velveeta Room or something, and, occasionally perform sets together. And then I think the next phase of our relationship was the Here We Are phase in like 2014 or 15, where I'm like doing the audio editing and website and art, and you're doing the podcast portion. And then I think it kind of goes into my own thing started to grow more, which takes away more of my time, and you needed more people on the team. So then Here We Are became this other team, and then I'm off doing my own thing. But then occasionally we get together for like stand-up science if I'm a guest on that or something. And then I think this is the next phase where it's like starting the actual you and me, Bob and Tom, Jerry and Fucky in the morning style of show, which these are just conversations we used to have. We used to just like talk on the phone about here we are at stuff and then just catch up on what was going on. But none of those conversations ever became a podcast. So now in the world of nonstop content production, it's like, why don't we make a show about the things we would normally have just called about?
Yeah, and we can't stop making. The reason why there's nonstop content is because if I stop making content, I will probably die, and I might die anyway.
I haven't released this yet, but I'm working on this like comic. Not a book, just like a single panel strip of someone looking at their iPad, and it's got one of those memes where it's like, it's okay to not always be productive, but then at the door it's got someone being like, sir, you're being evicted, you have 5 minutes to leave the premises, sir. And then it's like them knocking at the door continuously, because it's so easy to preach like, you don't have to do anything.
So this is so many of because we kind of were collaborating so much and working together, but also we had like some psychedelic experiences together, and so we tend to, when we talk on the phone, we tend to have like bigger conversations about meaning and drive and purpose, and we both are always like mining that well for like drive, and then going like, well, I was doing good for a while there, and then it all fell apart again, and I planted too many seeds in the garden, and it was so beautiful for a week, and now I ripped it all out and let it die, and I'm laying crying in this stupid patch of dirt that looked like hope for some reason. and that's so many of the conversations that we have, and they're super fun and thoughtful and funny, and they always make me I think they make me feel good. Yeah,
they make me laugh, but they also make me think. So I wrote something down that I wanted to bring up on this, since it's the original meaning, because like when asked the question, what is the meaning of life, or what is even the meaning of meaning, like I'm kind of hard pressed to actually answer it. But then last night I just started writing down a thing, and I'm sure this has been worded in some way before by dead philosophers who were much more brilliant and much more alcoholic than I. And
maybe or they were just humans that didn't have anywhere near the information that you have now.
Oh, that's true.
If they got to look at Wikipedia for one day, they would be like, oh, I gotta scrap all these things that I thought 1,000 years ago.
Just before I even take a piss in the morning, the amount of things that I look at and either like inspired is rare. Like rarely does something inspire you. Even if it's beautiful, it's more likely to trigger jealousy. Like if you're really into playing guitar or something, and then you see a 10-year-old that's just blowing you out of the water, and you're like, oh, that's not inspiring. Or even if it was someone twice your age, it's not really inspiring a lot of the time. But just the sheer amount of content we can take in, whether it does you good or not. But I digress. The statement I wanted to make was that, so claiming that there's no definitive meaning at all is a meaning. So it's this kind of trap you get into. So if you're a hardcore atheist, that itself is like taking a stance and saying that you know everything. And it is pretty silly to think that, we think of tapeworms as dumb. They're not really experiencing anything. And the sun is dumb. It's not experiencing anything. So only us anthropoid apes at this resolution are experiencing the illusion of meaning, and everything else is completely not privy to this feedback loop of neurosis of consciousness. So we don't really know that. And it's possible that there's an entity that's the size of a galaxy that it's like, oh, look at that stupid human. It thinks that there's actually meaning. I am so much more brilliant, and I know there's no meaning. But what if there's a being the size of 100 million galaxies that's like, you stupid fuck, you galaxy think you know. I know that's kind of a stretch, but
yeah, or maybe the smartest thing in the universe is way smaller than we could ever perceive, and it still has no idea that it's within something that's a zillion orders of magnitude larger than it, and is inferior to it but superior to it, and isn't aware that it's there. All at the same time. I mean, I think it's meaning and meaningless everywhere you look, from every angle. Like, it's just inescapable.
They need each other. It's Batman and Joker. It's socialism and capitalism. It's up and down. They need each other to exist. We need existence and non-existence to hold each other up. It's literally the hand drawing itself. Okay, not literally, because that would imply that at the smallest level there's a hand and a pen. But you know what I mean. It's the paradox creating itself, and also, like, meaning implies that you're condensing the infinite whole of everything into something you can stand outside of and hold in your hand like a grapefruit. But you can't stand outside of nasty infinity. You can stand outside of limited infinities, like, the number of numbers between 1 and 2. There's 1.11, 1.111, 1.111. So there's infinite, distance between. What was that beach thing where it's like the beach is infinitely long based on how big your measuring stick is?
Yeah, it's depending on how specific, how accurately the more accurate you try to measure something, the more infinite it becomes. So imagine a shoreline that has like a bit of a bend in it, and there's a point at the shore, and then at one end, and then a point at the other end, and there's some bendy and waviness in between. And you were to ask, like, how long is it from point A to point B, you might at first measure that bird's eye straight line on a map and say it's 100 meters long. But then if you are like, okay, well, let's be a little more accurate and descriptive, you might draw a point that's in between those 2 points along the curve, and now you have like 2 lines of a triangle that you're measuring, so it's a little more accurate. So now it's like 110 meters long, and then you draw another point, and then it gets a little longer because it's more accurate. And if you go down to like the kind of like you're measuring things on an atomic level, that beach line is infinitely long. But what's odd about it is that it still fits within a finite space. So you can draw a square around that area, or show someone a map with that, and that's a finite square that you've drawn, but infinity is fitting inside of it.
Yeah, so you stand outside of a limited infinity as opposed to the infinite kind of infinity, which is an infinity of every direction expanding outward. So you just could never stand outside of it. And that's what existence is, I think. Like, that's why there is shit, as opposed to it being a dimensionless plenum.
Yeah, and we can certainly describe things, like words and descriptions are really useful, forming models of the universe and objective reality, to home in on what objective reality is, and things that you can make a prediction on and be falsified, and all that. That's all. Those things are all really, really useful, and you'll never get to the end of it. You'll never get to that. What is the exact temperature that water boils at? Is it 100 and I don't even know the ballpark. Is it like, I think it's like 147 or so. Don't quote me on that. But you might say, okay, it's 147.5. Okay, it's 147.58, and you'll never get to the end.
That's Rupert Sheldrake's rap about the speed of light, because he says that the speed of light might be a variant as opposed to a constant. And I recognize the benefits of making it a constant, because then otherwise, how do you do your large scale physics without the speed of light being a constant? But they measured it like 80 years ago, it was one speed. They measured it 60 years later, it was a different speed. And this is accounting for error in measurement of instruments. It's like implying that the speed of light has varied over the years, but over time they're just like, fuck it, let's make a standard and the institute of keeping the speed of light where it is. And so now it's solidified, where who knows, maybe it changes, and there's something to be said about that, like with gravitational waves and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I think that those descriptions are useful and will hopefully become more accurate as more information comes in, and we should be updating them, using kind of Bayesian processing to update.
What's Bayesian processing?
It's just using the best information that you have at the time and being willing to like discard it and update that once the new model, once there's now a new technology.
Was there like a scientist named like Alexander Bayes or something, and he's like, I have the best method and we're naming it after me, the Bayesian method?
Probably. I don't know as much about the history of various sciences as I do like what is currently kind of known about things and what gets tossed around. For the same reason I don't know that much stuff about philosophy, because like when I go back and hear what Plato says, I'm always like, well, yeah, but he didn't know about Darwin. So like if he knew about evolution, which he simply couldn't fathom, he would have changed it. He would have immediately just taken a big black marker to most of his most famous quotes. And so like, give me the stuff like, what do we know right now? That's the best information that we have. It doesn't always go in this linear fashion. Sometimes we stray from the path and need to go back and reassess things. But I also think, if I had a bone to pick with the appreciation of the infinite and the unknown and the fractal, it's an impossible task. No one's ever going to know everything. That doesn't mean that things aren't worth knowing. It doesn't mean that it's not a goal worth pursuing to keep on trying to learn more and form better models, just because there will never be a perfect one. Just because there will never be perfection, and just because we'll never have a magic bullet, doesn't mean we discard everything and then in lieu of that just believe whatever we want to believe,
like our friend Dr. Jordan B. Peterson says, the solution to lack of consciousness is not going unconscious, but it's becoming more conscious. See, we were cast out of the Garden of Eden, and I mean, it's a bloody rough ride, but you only get there by knowing more, man. And look at God. God is omnipotent. He's omniscient, and he can do anything. So what is the one thing God doesn't have? And that's limitation. So he gave it to us to experience limitation.
So why does he say bloody so much?
Oh, because he's Canadian. And I don't know, some people just have it.
Canadians don't say bloody. That's like isn't that like an English thing?
Yeah, maybe. But maybe he just jacked it. Like maybe there was a trend where Canadians were saying it like 30 years ago, and then like it just stuck. Whereas now it looks weird. Aisling B, God damn it, Irish and Scottish always trip me up, and I always say the wrong one when I'm near one of them. But it's okay because it's white people, so you can be like, what are you, Irish or Scottish? And then they try to answer you, and you're like, shut up, you fucking white. And then everyone gives you an award. Just to take it back to, I think social media has made Martin Luther King Day so funny, because like you get to see people's politics so clearly, because MLK Day is now just share your favorite MLK meme that you found on Google Images, and you've got half the people like posting, I choose to surrender to love. Hate is too much of a burden to bear. And then the other people are quoting like, the white man is an abomination. He must be stopped before he ruins all there is. And his skin is white and he is the devil. And it's like white people people with large hats in Silver Lake posting that.
And then you have Trump on the very day, on MLK Day, like the administration releasing this whole thing that's like, our founding fathers it's fine that they own slaves. And like,
he did. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, but oh man, I didn't see that.
He loves doing stuff like that.
Where was that released? Because he doesn't have a Twitter anymore.
I don't know. It was on some trending thing.
Isn't that funny? There's like unlimited places you can just post stuff on the internet, but since he doesn't have a Twitter, it's like, where is he? I guess he's gone.
Yeah, what's going through his noggin right now that you can't see it?
I don't know. I didn't know 4 years ago what's actually going through his noggin, especially not now. It is kind of comforting that all these people are going to be dead in 10 years, probably. Like all these old people we hate, Trump, Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, and like they're all just so ancient. They're not going to be here in 10 years.
Oh yeah.
Who knows what's going to replace it?
I don't think Biden's going to make it through.
Oh, Biden for sure. Biden is the oldest president ever elected by 8 years.
And he's coughy as fuck. He's just always coughing.
Like, did he get COVID? No, he didn't get COVID.
No, we would have just known. Over the last months, like every time I see him, he's just like, every time he's
listen
talking,
here,
he's
fat.
like,
I can't do a good Biden. Nick Mullen does a dead on Biden, and I haven't seen anyone do a Biden, but he's isolated it to like certain syllables. It's like victory, Barack, gotta go forward. It's like I said back when I was with Barack. We got to focus on not just getting pussy. You'll get pussy, but you want victory. People say they want $2,000 an hour, and I say, look, fat. I don't know. I don't think I got even one tone of it right, but there's a distinct register of Biden.
It was like a blending of Biden and Obama. That was your impression.
He speaks like Obama though, which is a good strategy, but like his cadence is like, Obama light. And I don't think it was always like that, but he's like playing that up.
I do like recently when Obama was like, he was like, hey, I think that defund the phrasing, defund the police might not have accurately like communicated what you were trying for, and might have been like unnecessarily divisive, and like you might want to like rebrand that. And people were like, how could you say that? Obama? It's like, guys, you're talking about like maybe the single greatest communicator of our lifetime. Like, he was so good at communicating that he became the first Black president of the United States, which we take for granted was at the time like impossible.
Yeah,
like at the time it was impossible. Like it was crazy that it
never happened. Thought it would happen.
And like the single greatest communicator of our lifetime, and you're like, whatever. It's like, guys, like, way to just fucking cannibalize yourself all of the time, which is and that's the thing about the Democrats is that Democrats is more just an umbrella term for everyone that isn't a tribalist. Like it's and it's like your own tribe of like, we're the tribe of everyone so different, so it's like this weird
there's an interesting history about, like, I don't even know it fully, but the Democratic Party, it's so interesting that they are the KKK party. Like initially they were this pro-segregation party, and then they were the working class party, and then something happened with like the return to Reaganism, and everything went really Republican for a while. You had like two terms of Reagan and George Bush Sr. and the Democratic Party. This is all just regurgitation of another podcast I heard, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. But the Democratic Party shifted to intersectionality as opposed to the worker, so they made it more about the the optics than actually helping people. So that's people's main critique of them, I think, is that they're all talk, and then when it comes to actually helping the people they say they're aligned with, it's like, oh yeah, I got your vote, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think there's definitely a difference between, like, you take someone who, you know, it might be unfair to pit Obama against Donald Trump because Donald Trump was a just obnoxious, horrial con
just a
man.
Little bit, just a wee bit.
and Obama was like a very competent like communicator.
It's unbelievable. I listened to the Michelle Obama podcast with the first guest is her husband, Barack Obama, and just the contrast of the way they communicate versus the Trump world. It's unbelievable that they were back to back. I can't believe it.
It's yeah, and it's like it's not even a comparison. So it might be an unfair comparison, but you know, Obama was he was a community organizer and like a grassroots community organizer. He was a you know, he studied constitutional law. He did all of, like, I think that he, to me, acted like someone. I'm sure he made a lot of like decisions that can be criticized or like might be hypocritical and everything else, but he seemed to act with integrity in terms of like actually trying to pursue doing what he was presenting.
He actively went and drone striked a little boy in Afghanistan's wedding. He, like, his everyone said no, please don't, and
everyone said no, please.
Yeah,
don't.
Mitt Romney begged him, please, sir, think conservatively, and then he said, "Fuck your conservatism," and he drone striked the poor little boys for his own pleasure. So I take issue with his you know, recreational drone striking. He didn't have to do that, but
this is like this is slightly more political than I'm hoping our first episode, but this is actually like a perfect this perfectly illustrates the idea of meaning to me. I think that there's a lot of difference between, I think there's a personality type, whereas like people are like, here's a meaning, like show me a symbol, tell me that symbol is like the meaning, and then like I like that symbol. Like you got, whereas like other people are like, here's a structure of ideas that like I believe in, and you can switch the names around on that all you want, but you know, like I'm against slavery no matter what flag it flies under, no matter what party is like for it or whatever else. And then other people that are like, well, if our team does slavery, we do slavery then. You know, that's like, yeah. We have the and I think the same, it's the same with like good things. People make it like Jesus or Buddha or whatever else. And I think that the issue potentially with that is it's really, I think that there's so much drive that comes out of that for people. People do like so much good on behalf of these symbols, but those symbols can be manipulated where people can be like, oh, you like this symbol? Oh, me too. I like that symbol too. And so like me, because I'm for your symbol and I'm going to protect your symbol. That word that you like, I'm going to protect that word because that's the thing. And then you can just like swap it out. Like, okay, that guy's defending the word, and then you can just turn it into like your word now. Like
it's a shell game. Yeah, it's a sleight of hand where they've flipped the meaning of it, and you think you're supporting one thing, and it's actually the opposite.
I mean, look at MAGA. The most like I had a thing
it's
before
the last
COVID.
A that's a problem. The MAGA. Someone was saying that because like if it was just Make America Great, no problem. But the again part implies that at some point this was really good, and it wasn't for a lot of people. So the again part is where the problem is.
And it's, I mean, it's a personality difference of for the most part of higher in openness and lower in openness, and that whole spectrum has value. That's why we evolved it. And
you and I are both off the charts openness, right?
Yeah, but there is, I think so. But I also think that there's something that like the openness, you can be so high in openness that there's just like no end to it, you know,
because like you're open to the idea that it's all wrong. So then like you also are closed off because you reject everything as being solid because it's probably full of shit. So I'm so open that I'm not open.
Yeah, I think that we're probably in dangerous territory of that happening. But because that's like the Q shaman. That's like that's sort of like,
where's he now? Does he have a podcast? Is he on Dave Rubin show now or something? Dave Rubin is a funny one, and I know like we should have a. I think I said in the Google Doc like as a potential idea. I was just writing it down there. I might be stupid, but like visiting different characters of the intellectual dark web and like seeing which ones are kind of, they have something good to say and which ones are just grifters, because it's such a broad term and there are some cool thoughts in the IDW, but there's some of them that are just, they just have a conservative talking head on every week and they're just like, I agree with what you're saying. I agree. And I agree. And you do see this on the right, but you mainly see it on the left, which are mainly seeing this kind of behavior on the left. Like Dave Rubin is, he's gay and married, and like he'll have Ben Shapiro on, and Ben Shapiro, when asked if he would attend his wedding, he's like, no, I would not. That goes against my religion, and I would not attend it, but I would still say congratulations, but I would not be at the ceremony or at the barbecue following the ceremony. And he's like, I agree with that, and I respect that.
So back to meaning a little bit. Just like I want people to have like a sense of the foundation of like what our approach to understanding meaning or motivation is, because this is basically, so what grabbed me when we were talking was you had just done a piece of work that was basically there was one drawing that was like someone in front of the computer on a screen that was like, here's how to get motivation, like someone watching a motivation video, and then like the same gray person just doing the thing without motivation, and then another slide of someone on a bike saying, look ma, no motivation. And it really sums up the kind of thing that I'm interested in exploring, because to me, I think that when you ask someone, what's the meaning of life? They'll give you an answer. And I think that that's what's wrong. Like that people do think that they're going to, that there is a clear meaning that like is undeniable, and that they're heading toward that meaning. And the purpose is to get to that. That's like the finish line that you're going to cross.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, I think where that comes from, I'm not shitting on that, because I think having goals and everything else is important. I just think that where that's coming from is an illusion that has kind of been, it's a propensity that's then articulated through conscious storytelling, which is, instead of like a goal, instead of a finish line that you're ever going to cross, I think that that yearning and that seeking is a driver that has evolved to be built within you, that drives you toward, that has in the past led your ancestors to successfully reproduce and survive long enough to reproduce and set their offspring up to survive long enough to reproduce and do that more than other ancestors that did.
Isn't it so funny that we're breaking the chain, or who knows what'll play out, but just they all reproduce successfully, and then we're just here like, no, I'm just gonna podcast instead of make another me.
And so that's one of my favorite subjects, is the mismatch with our modern world, because all of these things evolved before birth control. So to me, it would make sense for a human organism, or just mammals generally. I'm sure that there's plenty of mammals that think their kids a pain in the ass, or get annoyed with their kids or whatever, and understand, because offspring are costly. Not for, sometimes there's just fish that like blow their loads, and the males blow their load, the females blow their load or whatever, and the eggs are fertilized and see ya. But like in terms of mammals, there's like usually costly offspring, and I'm sure like that beautiful scene in David Attenborough of like the polar bear, the mother polar bear, and like going back to get the cub, and like it looks like, oh my gosh, look at this Hallmark card. This is what a mother's love. I'm sure that mother in her mind is like, God, this worthless idiot. How long is it going to keep? And so I think that the mind would have evolved features to recognize the high cost, because sex feeling so good evolved to motivate. Otherwise, sex is like, you don't program a robot to have sex.
It's so ridiculous whether there's a purpose for it or not. It is really ridiculous when you think about it.
You need to brains that evolved for sex to feel good left more offspring behind, and there must have been. So it's easy to be like, oh, sex feels good to so that you'll have offspring and blah blah blah. Your genes will perpetuate, but there must have been a limit. There's no reason why sex couldn't have felt better. There must have been some cutoff point, and you hear about like sex addicts and stuff. There must be some cost involved where if someone like happens to have this gene combination that just makes them like ravenously horny, like, and sex just feels like twice as good as it does to the average person. They're just like out of control in their life. They either can't stop masturbating or can't stop pursuing mates at a detriment to all of these other things, and their social costs, they're getting in fights or like whatever else. And so there would have had to have been things to like recognize the cost of offspring, and then but it wouldn't matter, because sex feels so good that whether you recognize the offspring, you're still gonna bang.
Yeah,
so these genes are gonna spread. But then all of the sudden, birth control. Evolution never saw that coming.
50 years ago, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? 60 years ago or something like that. Yeah, insane. And I'm sure evolutionary biologists have talked about this ad nauseum, but birth control leading to you don't have feminism and women's rights and women in the workplace and all that kind of stuff without kind of harnessing your biology a little bit, right? Because otherwise you're kind of trapped, especially in the old world where like if you didn't rape, you were gay. Like it's gone from where like rape was like, let's say 30 years ago, it's like, well, we just don't talk about that. Or you hear stories of domestic abusers. The cops are called on the house, and the cop is just kind of looks at the beaten wife and it's just like, all right, well, just try to keep it down in here.
Yeah, and it's easy to look back at that and be like, well, maybe that's what our primitive mind was like, and we've evolved since then. But you could make a case that you don't see that kind of abuse in like hunter-gatherer societies, because they all know what everyone's up to all of the time, and so there's different things being selected for, and it's possible that those kind of traits are the kind of like American Psycho or something like that just simply couldn't exist in the social structures that existed before cities, before people could like go to a city, fleece everyone, go to the next city, fleece another person. I don't think you could get away with that, and so there was probably features of our evolved mind that allowed us to like cheat a little bit and take advantage. And there's cases made that the average person, like all the pens go missing from the office. It's not like one pen bandit. It's everybody stole like a couple pens, and everyone told themselves a story.
So the Pareto principle doesn't apply there, where it's like 80% of the stolen pens are done by 20% of the employees.
Just like 5 people just have pockets full of pens and stuff. And no, it's just that the average person will tell themselves a story like, well, this isn't stealing. Like, I work hard, and like, yeah, it's a little pen, and so we all like cheat like a little bit. And then there's just environments in which we can exploit that aspect of our inner selves in this modern environment more than in the past. So anyway, in terms of meaning, I think that it's really important for us to know, like, what is my brain for? What are the evolved features that drive it to do the things that it does? What aspects of this existence do I actually like and want? Because your genes want to keep on perpetuating. Your genes would, if you don't have offspring, your genes don't. You have siblings and other family and stuff, but just at the like parsed down, overly simplified version of it, if you don't have kids, there's no little Ramins going off into the future.
Except now with this asymptotic novelty curve we're on, with like deep fakes and technology kind of spiraling outwards everywhere, I think I've brought up before that every combination of me in the future is going to exist, where it's going to be copies of me like this, copies of me like where like, oh, I wonder what happens if I made a kid. He has a kid with Al Pacino. What would that look like? Even though biologically currently they wouldn't be able to produce that child, but let's splice them together, deep fake it, give him some personality, give him this tweak, reduce his IQ even more, and then see what that looks like. Yeah. That's funny. Let's kill it. And then they come up with another one. But I think this goes to this fundamental thing that I believe in, which the universe doesn't get rid of anything. It takes it away for a little bit, maybe like the McRib, but the McRib never goes away forever. Like the early universe has hydrogen, and then it evolves more complex stuff than hydrogen, but hydrogen is still hanging out. And same with like slugs, or like, oh, if we evolved from monkeys, why is there still monkeys? Because the universe keeps behind the old shit as well. And as there's going to be stuff more complex than us, it's like, well, why is there still humans? Well, because the humans don't know how to go that next level, so we're just here being idiots.
Yeah, the why is there still chimps and stuff argument is like, yeah, that's people have a misunderstanding of the evolutionary, the common tree. Ancestor. That's more of like a web. Yeah. That McRib comparison is so good. That would make for a good piece of art. If there was like a way of having like the McRib coming out of the Big Bang or something.
It did. Like it came out of the Big Bang. It took it a few billion years, but eventually nothingness made a McRib, and it had to make like tons of like skeletal structures and and neurological systems that work for a long time. And then eventually a McRib came, and then it went away, and then it came back, and then it went away, and then it came back. Or Ninja Turtles. I watched Ninja Turtles when I was a little kid. I'm like, oh, kids today probably don't know about Ninja Turtles, but now there's been 100 different versions of Ninja Turtles, 100 different versions of Star Wars. Star Wars was made before I was born, etc.
Yeah, I think that there are inevitable properties in things that. So, do you know what convergent evolution is?
Convergent evolution? So is that where everything becomes a crab? Where the universe has evolved towards crab, from a lot of different directions, where it just kind of ends up at crab again for some reason.
Yeah, it's like people look and are like, how did people think of the idea for flight? Like, how did flight emerge at 5 different places around the world within a span of 2 decades, and none of those people were talking with one another? How did that happen? And it's just because the environment was just so that was if something like that emerged, it would be selected for and take off. There's there's something in South Africa that's like the American weasel, and it has they don't have any genetic ties whatsoever. It's just that there's a particular environment where if this long, narrow, burrowing mammal does evolve, it will do well in an environment with these conditions.
Yeah. And it's us that's putting it in these little categories. Nature doesn't see the categories. Nature just sees it as one gene swarm of DNA that's kind of intermixing and growing outwards. It's not this is the American weasel, this is a crab. It's it gets very blurry from the nature perspective. Also, I wanted to say that is convergent evolution? Yeah. That's a good argument. That's a good pro-choice argument, because oftentimes they're what if you aborted the kid that's going to cure cancer? It's don't worry, there would have been another kid that cures cancer, because the time had arrived, so 18 people did it.
Yeah. Well,
so kill that kid. Kill that cancer.
If I aborted the kid that was going to kill cancer, that's one less person you're going to yell at for believing in science.
Oh man, you probably get so much hate for being you're in the comedy world and the science world. So sometimes
it's so insane, man. It's once COVID happened, it's never in all of the Here We Are podcast did I get guffed. Never was anyone yeah, but do they really know how spiders work?
No, that's why we're still studying them. But they know more than you do. They know more than this Twitter fuck.
But the moment there's an inconvenient reality that happens, people are just denial, anger, grief, all of the things. And it's people didn't get this mad at science when science managed H1N1 or when it managed SARS, or all of these things didn't become this global scale. We got to shut down everything. This is an extreme situation. The same with global warming. People don't cause a big fuss when hey, our lake doesn't start on fire from pollution anymore.
Global warming needs different branding. I swear it's a branding and marketing problem, and they need some kind of non-Al Gore person to talk about it, some non-Greta Thunberg person to talk about it, because half of the world is on board, and it's half of the world needs to I know I'm always against the division stuff, but half the world needs to get together and be hey, we're going to get a Donald Trump-esque guy, but he's very his cause is global warming, and he's going to appear very anti-liberal, but he's our guy. We hired him. He's an actor. So guys, just play it cool for this. And then you can have that Trump guy be all about environmentalism or something.
There's actually something like 80% of people believe that global warming is real. Something like 70 or something like 60% believe that global warming, that humans influence global warming, and then something like 50% agree with that, like global warming will negatively impact, like something like 40% are like global warming will negatively impact me, like it will actually affect me. And so that's it's not even it. We'll need to see the way, and COVID's a good example of the counterintuitive ways in which climate and environmental changes create issues that you can't foresee, because COVID wouldn't happen if it, the reason why there's like these novel viruses that will continue to cause us issues is because as we continue to deforest and everything else, what biodiversity is left is crunched into smaller and smaller areas together. There's more zoonosis. There's more viruses evolving faster because they're in like you're just creating this perfect petri dish for viruses. Not to mention putting a bunch of cow. That's why you got to shoot every cow and chicken with antibiotics and everything else, because you're not supposed to clump things together. That's why the Europeans had already adapted to smallpox before bringing it to America, because they had gone through a slower process of domesticating livestock, which led to like things being covered in feces and stuff in a way that they aren't supposed to in the wild, which led to viruses taking off more, which led to zoonosis, and then a modern environment where now you have global travel. So now you have invasive species taking, like the murder hornet, for example, which may or may not be an issue. It's the giant Asian hornet, which was characterized as the murder hornet.
It was supposed to be the headliner, and it got bumped.
Yeah.
Murder hornets was supposed to be the main thing in 2020, and it barely made it to the top 50 list.
There's the bees in its native environment have adapted through a slow co-evolutionary arms race over generations, over years and years and years and years and years, have adapted defenses to this hornet. The bees in the US don't have those same adaptions because they haven't faced the pressure. They haven't had any utility for those adaptions, and so they are unprepared when an invasive giant Asian hornet comes and then just wipes out an entire colony in like a few hours. It can't do that in its native environment. Well, things like COVID are there's going to be things taking off like this, where they're evolving like this. They're getting all of these offensive and defensive tools, and then they're taking off and invading a novel environment that in our past world would have never happened. So there's all of these problems with modern humanity that are going to, so if you solve some of the lack of biodiversity problems and some of the environmental issues, you also lower virus spread, and you lower hurricanes and all of these other things.
But we'll see.
Yeah. So, but I doubt it's going to happen. So it'll probably be, I don't know. Who knows how bad it'll be.
I think that so much of this relies on like, I don't know if this is a stretch, but just the cold turkey approach doesn't work. Like when you see an article where it's like, looks like within 6 months, we're not going to have any more bees. And as a result of the bees all dying, global warming is going to accelerate tenfold unless you change everything personally now, unless you don't use water when you brush your teeth, only use 6 drops when you shower, even though the US is only 15% of emissions. And most of those emissions are done by the large corporations. So even if all of us as citizens were like, okay, no more showers, no more throwing out stuff in the garbage, it's still mostly the big boys that are doing the damage. And even if the US was 100% green, we've still got that 75% of emissions going on around the world. So it's going to take a lot.
But policy change can be hugely instrumental. Like part of the trick of corporations is the rebranding of things on to put it on the shoulders of the individual. They did this with car safety. They said like, oh, we don't need to install safety belts or airbags or make our cars safer. These are bad drivers. And BP did the same. BP started the carbon footprint thing. They coined the term carbon footprint to put ownership of the environment on the individual, as they just pumped out and ruined everything and
so funny
for oil and everything else. And so policy change could have huge implications. And so we'll see. So all of this stuff is to say that I think that we're very much on the same page in terms of lots of aspects of meaning. Whereas I think that, to me, when you ask like, what's it all mean? I'm usually like, well, what's what mean? It's a case by case basis. Like, tell me what you like want me to make sense of. Like, hey, what's it mean when you like take this action, or why does this happen? And I can tell you, or we can try to articulate, why something means, like what this action means in terms of its effect on this thing within this limited context of this situation. And there's a lot of great meaning there. But this idea that you're ever going to find like, I figured it out. There's one singular thing in life that is everything.
And his name is Jesus H. Christ, and he died for your sins, and you should feel bad about it. And you should feel even worse every day. That's the only way you can be good. Oh, and also it's the year 2021, which feels futuristic to us, despite all that's going on. But like, we're still like, we might as well be 80s humans, or we might as well be 40s humans in the grand scheme of things. So to think that, oh, these two guys in the 40s figured it out. Of course, two guys in the 2020s don't know shit yet. Even the way we speak, like, they're going to look back on this in 30 years and be like, hey, look at the way they speak. Like, the terms they're still using, they still talk about MAGA and wokeness and yes girl and whatever we say.
What is yes girl? I don't
know. I just threw that one in there. I'm not that good at improv. Sometimes I am, but sometimes you like open the box and you're like, I got nothing in there. Yes girl.
You said yes girl last time too, and I
said yes queen. I said yes queen before.
What is yes queen?
Oh, yes queen is just I don't know where it originated. Like, maybe it was not Beyonce, but it's just one of those things you see in the culture where it's like local Trump supporter given 6 years in jail after trying to enter in Walmart without a mask. Yes queen. Or just when I don't know, like they're showing a picture of Kamala Harris from the 80s or something. It's like, yes. No one told me that the vice president was a model. Yes. It's very, I don't know, you could say it's like the bourgeoisie liberal that's appropriating Black culture. And
that's amazing.
I don't know, but it's just one of those little phenomenons that's like, it's a word. Maybe people don't even say it much anymore. Maybe it was more 2016 or 17. It's just kind of fun. It's fun to just go, yes. Like, it's fun to just be like, it would be so easy to be regular Democrat Hollywood celebrity. Like, anytime there's something in the news, to just make a statement like, racism is an abomination. This is not okay. We must end injustice. And you don't do shit. You just make the statement of like the thing that people want to hear. Like, okay, that's nice, but what are you doing about it? And I don't know. It's funny.
I think people, even that though, I think people would do better like explaining and understanding than like standing for, you know, like I think a good example is that like gender and sex are kind of biologically two different things. So it's like sexuality and whatnot, and kind of the different cascades of interactions that happen in the building blocks of those things early on in life are really interesting. And sometimes, so like there's certain things that get flipped, and sometimes so there's masculinized and feminized brains, and then there's masculinized and feminized bodies, and usually they end up in the same thing. But you could show like, say I was like, Ramin, I gotta tell you, I've always been a woman. You probably knew this, but I've always been a woman trapped in this body. Fortunately, my name is Shane, which could also be a female name, so it's going to be a smooth transition for me.
Shania.
Typically, you put someone that claims this and is like, they swear that this to be the case, and you put them in an MRI, and you give that MRI to a neuroscientist, and a neuroscientist would be like, yes, this is a Shaniqua. This is a feminized brain. It has these aspects of it that are larger in some areas and smaller in other areas. This has these feminized features to it. And
I told you you're Shania. I like that you got to make yourself Shaniqua.
And so I mean, I think that if a lot of people knew that, it would do more good than being like, we must let that, like, don't, like, I know you're confused when there's someone that looks like a dude walking into a female bathroom, but we're going to not explain what's going on and just like say you must allow this. Can
you restate that? Are you saying that the MRI shows sometimes that there's a mismatch? Because I'm wondering, what about cases where the MRI doesn't show that? Because like that shouldn't have to be the requirement.
That shouldn't be a requirement, but I just think that it's this interesting thing that the average person wouldn't know about.
I didn't even know that. So this is not, most trans people have that going on, or just sometimes they've shown it?
Yeah, I think pretty often. I'm worried that I'm incorrect about some of this and how.
Oh yeah, you gotta be by nature like we gotta be
overly
incorrect.
Characterizing it. But yeah, this is the general. Just like people used to be in terms of gay rights, they used to be like, well, it's they're born gay, they can't help that this isn't a choice or whatever. When people were trying to do like gay conversion therapy, there are features within genes, within genetics, that where there's just things that get swapped, and it's not like, so when people are like, a trans person is someone that is that's like insane, it's a mental health issue. It's like, no, their actual brain was always a female brain inside of a male body, and probably having to live that way, I imagine, is probably fucking weird and crazy, but it's not like this mental health issue. I mean, there might be
maybe some of them are
come of it.
Like maybe, I mean, there might be select ones, like some outliers who might be trans for 5 years and be like, oh, sorry guys, I was nuts back then, but most people probably not.
So I think that in that same way, I think that understanding evolved in and out group biases that we all have, understanding egocentrism, not as like hey, you have an ego, you're full of yourself, but in a, we are all at the center of our own universe of perception. There is no other possible way. That's the constraint that we live in. We tend to overvalue the information that is in our proximate area over, say, things that are going on in some state that might be important that I don't have access to right now, that like, you know, I can't work with. I can't suppose what is maybe happening somewhere else and work with that. So I tend to overvalue the information that I have, which is in this conversation right now. And because of that, I tend to neglect the things that are outside of my like limited range of what I can perceive, and I tend to emphasize like myself and advocate for my little perceived area and universe of perception that I'm in. And we all do this, not just with race, but with just endless things in life. And I think that would be a more productive conversation than perpetuating the issue with Black Lives Matters. Isn't like, I think that it's great because when it's pointing to, hey, this social construct of blackness, which it is, like, it's not a race isn't a genetic thing, it's a social. There's Europe, there's people that have evolved from Europeans that are more genetically similar to some African Americans than some African Americans are to other African Americans, just by the weird nature in which evolution worked out.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's basically, so there was this huge pool of genetic diversity before humans started migrating elsewhere in the world. We all evolved from Africa, and there's a small pool that evolved and split.
Someone
off
was
into
saying
Europe.
that, and I think it's a mutual friend of ours, and he was saying, like, I know I get a lot of shit for this, but I think we all come from Africa. And he was just saying it on a phone call, so it's it's funny. It wasn't something he'd ever put out on a podcast or something, but I like that. Like, look, we're all Africans here. It's like, oh yeah, don't tweet that.
Well, I mean, we're all humans, but
yeah, the fact that it's called race is weird because race implies that you wouldn't be able to mix the two. Like that, but there is no race. We're the same species, clearly.
Yeah. Speciation happens when you can no longer breed. So we're clearly the same species. There's two there's like birds that look morphologically like very, very similar, that, you know, can't breed with one another. So they're two different species of birds.
Did we come from Africa, or did we come from Pangea? In the little section that Africa was in, because the Earth used to just have water and then one continent, and then that one continent split off into the other 5 queefs. And
I forget when the queefing happened.
Yeah, who knows? Europe did it. Europe's like, we don't want to be part of Africa anymore, so they made their white tools and then they carved their whiteness out. Into the ground. Yeah, and then they conquered the world through colonialism.
Yeah, it was more of a sun and skin tone getting vitamin D.
Yeah, but I see what you mean by it's a social construct, and it's not. It kind of depends, and politically, I feel like whether it's okay to say that would change month by month, because if you say that it's like race is not a social construct, you cannot society your way out of race. No matter how far up the ladder you go, you will always be your race. Even if we wiped the memory of everyone on the planet, you would still be racist. Even if you weren't a being, even if you are a rock, you would still have racial bias. And you can only solve it by reading Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility for $19.95 and for $100,000 speaking fee.
Yeah, I think that there's always going to be some level of like bigotry and racism, and that is no excuse to like accept it. And there's also going to be especially marginalized groups. I think that you take X race and give them, you know, tons of power and the ability to do whatever they want, and they might at the very least like not think about and neglect, if not take advantage of the people that don't have, of Y group that doesn't have those same advantages. It wouldn't, that
I had a joke that I never actually made into a joke, so this is more of a premise that probably isn't even that good of a joke, but something to the nature of the reason white people control the world is that they're on time, and every other ethnicity just isn't on time. Like you look at the stereotypes like mine, Middle Eastern people not on time, black people not on time, etc. And then white people like show up 15 minutes early. So they got to the place a little earlier, and then everyone else is like, no, we can get there at 8:17. It'll be fine. And then we lost the battle.
Just like the anxious ones won, just like the type A's.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all these like weird things that get selected for bizarre reasons. Like it probably did benefit some people at different times to have more muscles, and like males would be selected for that. And now that everything is like thought work, like it's just not as tangible. I think the reason why we still value like, oh, this like salt of the earth, like working class or whatever, is because you can like really you can touch it. Like someone makes a widget or whatever in a factory, someone builds a piece of furniture, you can use that furniture. You're like, they did something. Like you spend time, you can spend years crafting this perfect like set for a comedy show, and people will be like, did you just come up with that when you were up there? It's so hard to appreciate, like what goes into thought work. And I think just by nature of that, because it's like then hard to monetize, and it's hard to like see the value and judge what is fair for like a day's thought work when like you can work harder in a hammock than a lot of like factory workers do on an average day. You can produce like way more beneficial goods for the world without ever having left your bed than someone like on an oil rig, like working their ass off and just like punishing themselves and determined and to like do a thing that we don't need more of.
It sucks when bosses, in the
opposite direction.
Yeah, it sucks when bosses value that more than productivity, where they're like, they just want their employees to be at the desk like clacking and typing away at the computer regardless of what their output is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are like, well, you should be working harder.
Yeah. So now we can see on your screen like what you're doing all of the time. So now you just got to be like on your screen like it's a treadmill, just like doing busy things to find like new tricks to like, oh, when I open these 5 windows in these increments, I get like a raise and don't get yelled at. And it's, yeah. So there's we're now moving into this world where much of our existence is so dependent on these invisible forces that it's such a mismatch. For like hunter-gatherers used to have this tangible, we're going to pick berries, we're going to like go out and get things, and then there were things that you would have to imagine, like keep an eye out for an invading tribe or where you might have to migrate next or something like that. But for example, like the earth being flat was the best working model of all for every mammal on earth. That's the best model of reality to be working from, until humans started needing to know that like the earth was round to have aspects of flight or space travel, or for us to be communicating. Right now there needs to be satellites in space. Like someone had better know how this shit worked.
Yeah.
Like no one needed to know before we figured it out and then built our entire economy based on this knowledge. But now we've built a system based on information that most of us don't have access to. We've built an entire system built on insane ideas about gravity working in ways that are so counterintuitive that like that time works differently the further away from the center of mass, that you need to know that just for your GPS to work. And now you can't get to your GPS if someone isn't doing like insanely complicated calculations to figure that out. And so much of our very existence today is on someone like knowing that shit. So now our faith almost has to be in understanding objective reality, which is usually very counterintuitive to the many drives that got us to where we needed to go. Like rain dancing had a lot of utility back when, like, what else were you gonna do? Like start digging a trench or whatever? You don't have a shovel right now. You don't have, like, you might as well get your mind off of it and use this opportunity to like get laid or, you know, blow off some steam or whatever. So
man, like, what can you unpack that a little bit? Like the being dependent on objective reality, on understanding objective reality. Because also you said we were standing on the shoulders of giants on giants on giants of giants. Like, I don't even understand the physics of 100 years ago. Like, go put me in that room with the, you know, the Copenhagen, gathering of Nobel laureates or whatever it's called. Like, I don't know how to have a conversation with any of them other than maybe I can goof on the help, but I don't.
And now it's like anyone can grab the book like A Brief History of Time and have like a pretty good understanding of the theory of relativity in, you know, like a day's time. You know, something that we look to as like, holy crap, this was the greatest genius we ever had and may ever have. You can in a day like learn his ideas, like, not as well as he knew them, of course, but like have a pretty good gist of them. Things that, like, if you went back before Einstein, if you were a time traveler and went back before Einstein, you could like blow physicists away with that information. And now we have a system completely dependent on, like, at the time that Einstein's theory of relativity came into being, there wasn't high stakes for understanding relativity until we used relativity to start putting stuff into space and communicating that way and whatnot. And now there's massive implications to understanding and furthering that knowledge. And we just have to keep on abstracting and building better models. And it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, we're still primitive too. Like, in that our energy efficiency, like, you know how they teach you in early science, like the amount of energy that's in this small potato could power the earth for like 100 million years, but we only know how to extract like 0.0001% of it. Yeah. So like, I'm sure in 100 years, if we don't destroy ourselves, which you always have to like add that to show that you're a good progressive and that you believe in and global warming and stuff. Like, if we don't destroy ourselves because we're humans and bad and we're all about war, we'll look back on this period as being very primitive with our Zoom calls and our transistors and whatnot.
Well, that's a great example of like just how important it is to actually know what you're talking about, because you can, like, progressives are against nuclear power, which is probably our best alternative right now, or certainly,
because like, nuclear is hydroelectric, right? But just a different, because that's the basis of it, right? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's cleaner, and it's basically the evolution of energy is such that it's like we're high metabolizers and we're these kind of efficiency recognizing tool makers and adapting to like what the next thing is. And so like the amount of labor, the amount of energy that like, so the amount of food that you have to eat and stuff to be able to chop wood to go and extract the energy from that from that wood to warm yourself around a fire is so much more than like coal was. Then coal was like much, it might look like a lot of work to get it out of there, but it's still more efficient than using wood to burn everything. And then like gasoline is another magnitude of efficiency, and then like nuclear is just so you always have to put energy into the extraction process and the processing and the transferring of energy, but nuclear is so much more efficient. But the point is that like an average liberal or a liberal will be like, oh, I don't believe in genetically modified food. It's like, well, then you don't believe in food.
Yeah. Yeah, go look at the original banana. The original banana is just a big pack of seeds and pus, and then we had to like selectively breed it for hundreds of years to make it the edible banana that it is today. Same with everything. Everything at the grocery store is a genetically modified version of what it once was.
You're a genetically modified being eating genetically modified things. Everything was genetically modified before there was a scientist or even such a word as genetics.
Add respect to Soylent. I want to see if they kept this language on their bottle. Oh, I guess they took it off their bottle. Interesting. The bottle of Soylent used to have a little section that said, "We are pro GMO. GMO means blah, 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 blah." Although most people think it means this other bad thing. We actually, so it gave that rap like condensed into a paragraph. But now I'm looking at the bottle and it's gone. So they had a change of heart, I guess, with that branding message.
Yeah, people just fall for like naturalistic, oh, if it's organic, it's good, and that sort of thing. And
yeah, it's an armpit hair toothbrush made with shaman armpit hair. It's better than anything Crest or Colgate will give you because they're just rich, fat people. And you have to trust me. Everyone I have like just turns into that character. Like, no.
I mean, we're also like, I feel more detached from the bubble of LA and New York just because I've spent all of my living on the road and I was like a factory worker and whatnot. So I mean, not that I'm like, I see both sides objectively, but
more than you most could hope for.
Yeah, like even my special mating season, creationists didn't like that I was talking about evolution. Liberals didn't like that I was talking about gender differences. Liberals have asinine things that they think about like research on like gender and things like research on like mating behavior, for example, or like why like a male elk behaves a certain way around a female elk. Like, you're saying that that's right to no one was saying that is right or just or that it should do that or should do more of this behavior or less of that behavior. They were simply describing the behavior.
Yeah. Have you heard Naval Ravikant's whole rant about I'm going to word it terribly, but something to the nature of there's a war going on between the hard sciences and the social sciences, and the contention point is in biology. That's where they're meeting, and like people are kind of afraid to talk, and the social sciences gained their reputation from the hard sciences because the hard sciences gave us actual working shit and transistors and all that. And as you become more away from the hard sciences, it becomes less predictable. So like physics is more of a predictive science than sociology. And
yeah, and it is interesting because there was like this I don't remember her name, like Barbara Mcclintock, who I think did she did a lot of stuff on she like revolutionized our understanding on how genetics looked by looking at corn and seeing that like corn was like changing its genes in this particular way. She did this like cryogenics. I can't the
liberal media has corrupted the corn, and that corn is not.
Well, she is basically like, there's been all sorts of stories of people where like normal science was like, you're crazy. Like, get out of here. Corn couldn't do that. And then like she has to go off and like live on a farm by herself for 30 years, like believing in her thing before she finally is awarded like the Nobel Prize for being correct or whatever. And so like things happen, like people have always been like the whole theory of relativity was like Einstein wouldn't approve a patent for everyone was trying to patent this idea of ether that was supposed to be like, that's how mass hasn't collapsed in and on itself. There must
be the early model of dark matter, ether?
Yeah, kind of like there must be this invisible force pushing everything away. That's how we still exist and haven't collapsed in on ourselves. And
have you heard or keep going with that?
Einstein was basically like, what's ether? And they're like, well, look, ether says, he's like, I just can't give you a patent for that. Like
the universe does like, not play dice.
as like working the things out himself, he was like, oh, here's what's going on. And then like revolutionized all of physics as a patent clerk.
There's a theory floating around. It might be bullshit. I don't understand it well enough. So maybe some actual astrophysicist can chime in, but, there's a theory that dark matter is not 95% of the universe. We actually might just have our proton radius measurement wrong, and that would change the whole thing to make things fit in better. Like instead of the proton being 1 point blah blah blah, it's actually 1.6, which accounts for. Because I learned recently that the strong force is not an actual force. It's a fudge factor that we put in there to make our equations work. Like gravity is a real measurable force, but the strong force is just a force we made up to explain why the nucleus of the atom can hold itself together.
I'm calling it the strong force.
Exactly. Yeah, the strong nuclear and the weak nuclear force, I think is what it's called.
And scientists have been bickering with each other back and forth, and some of them have like had massive implications, like the second bomb that was what was it, Hiroshima? Was that
Hiroshima?
Where it was dropped?
Nagasaki?
Which one was the second one? Whichever the second one was,
Benihana.
It was like it was Benihana. It was like 5 times the blast that it was meant to be because of this miscalculation. There was like one material that they used. They're like, we'll do this material to like soften it, so it's not going to be like as big of a blast. And then they're like, oh, whoopsie!
They made it 5 times bigger.
I think it was more than that. Yeah,
shit.
There was even like American like surveillance planes flying over to that like got knocked out of the sky by the that were like thought they were like well out of range, and like ships and stuff that thought they were like well out of range that were like, whoa, whoopsie daisy. So like there are major implications, but the whole point I was trying to say is like there's always stuff like bickering in academia happening, and one of which being like hiring issues and like who should be approved and whatnot right now, but never has it bubbled over into the populace so much. And it's because a lot of these red pills are pandering to like these like macho tough guy, like, populist stuff, like giving them like, you want to make fun of libs? Call them virtue signalers. And then they're like, what's a virtue signaler? Okay. Yeah. Like give me a smart word to own these lips with, and call him a cuck. This is what a cuck is. And then they have like their new fancy science.
It's funny that cuck like is the worst thing that they could be, but the people that the people that they call cucks are normally like, whoa, I don't see what's wrong with that. I mean, I'm not into it particularly, but my friend gets down with that all the time. My friend invited me to come fuck his wife, but I said no, I just wouldn't feel comfortable. But I've got a friend that'll come do that, and they videotaped it and they put it on X videos. And
plus, if you're a product of cucking, it means that you're like you have the genes of like physically superior dad, and then you had the upbringing of like a conscientious like provider, intelligent, and then a mother that was adaptive enough to like sort that out or be a high enough value mate or whatever else. And so if you're a product of a cuck, you probably have a superior understanding of cuckolding.
Yeah, you've got the bull's genes and the dad's dreams. I tried to rhyme it. It didn't work out well.
That was pretty solid.
Isn't the
for
number
a first
one?
Go at it? That was pretty solid.
Yeah, not a bad first take. I like that. Isn't like when they map out the porn searches and like the number one search term, and like the more red the state, the more into cuck and incest porn the searches are. I don't know what that says, but it's something to the nature of, when it's a very like stern Republican senator, he's the most likely to be caught with like a gay prostitute somewhere. The ones that pass the anti-gay legislation are often closeted gays themselves.
Yeah, lots of projecting in there.
Yes, that's the word.
Yeah. But yeah. So I think that there's a big difference between abstract thinking and concrete thinking, because if you look at the difference in like political opinions, like take my like mega family members that I'm like, how could they believe such stupid things, or like say uncomfortable like racial slang or something like that, but also they like show up to work on time each day, and like, by golly, then you go to church every Sunday and you do this and the community and such, and you go to the kids' games and you be a good father figure, and like in all these like concrete like discipline ways, they're like if you saw my room right now, I mean, it's disgusting. And like I'm always paying more taxes than I need to because I don't file them on time, or I forget their write-offs, or I don't pay this and that. And I'm like getting my, there's no free lunch. And it does seem like a lot of times people that are like really good at like these far out like abstractions of like, oh, I can piece together how, like, I can conceptualize how this condition, like these sheep herders in this region in Europe moved, were like these cultures of honor, and pride was more important in their line of work because they could be victimized by people that had that wanted to steal their sheep, and so they didn't take to insults very well, and those people tended to migrate to the south in the early when people started coming to America, and because they could be cattle drivers and stuff. And then there's these other things about being near the equator leading to a higher outgroup preference. And I can think about these things all day, and given the time, articulate them pretty well and come up with like novel ideas for like, well, here's what we could do. Here's a novel idea we could do about, and I can barely tie my shoes. And I think you're kind of the same way, in like a little well, your room's really clean though, and you get a bunch of stuff
particularly done. High functioning. I'm a very high functioning artist, I think. Like I'm just good enough at business and staying organized to survive as an artist, but I don't see myself making an empire. Maybe I will, who knows? But making like those people that build their empire and they figured out all the social media platforms, and in the span of 3 years they go from nothing to being everywhere, like that kind of business person. I'm not that. Like they know, like they're putting out stuff every day and it's clipped, and like they know it's just so much.
Yeah. I mean, but a lot of those people suck, you know, like, I mean, it's usually, I was always so bad at the business stuff because my early days in Boston, it was always whoever was good at putting together the stages and hustling and getting the gigs was always the worst comic. So I was like, well, I better not be good at those things because it apparently ruins your sense of humor. And that was a false association that I was making. It's just that people that are that good at that stuff can sometimes like elevate themselves despite having like talent deficits and or you know, good tastes in the field that they're trying to do.
It reminds me of this idiotic thought I had when I was like 6 years old, where, I mean, this shows like the stupid mind of a sixth grader, but there's this kid that was really annoying and mean, and like he had these, he was like a big fat kid too. And I like that I prefaced that he was annoying and mean, because if I started with the fat part, it's like, oh, come on, don't make fun of the fat kid. But when like he was 8 years old and I was 6, and in my head at that time, I remember having the thought, like, I don't want to turn 8, because what if I just become that kid? That kid's 8. Like when I'm 8, am I going to be like a big fat mean kid? And like, I want to stay me. And like, that's clearly not how age works. And I could have easily deduced that there were more 8-year-olds that were not like that. For whatever reason, in that moment, I was like, oh, I must find a way to never turn 8, because I'll become like this monster. Damien or whatever his name was.
Man, I just trailed off getting excited about this podcast, because as we're thinking of business stuff, I was actually thinking about this today.
Mugs as far as the eye can see.
Oh, well, we will. I mean, first off, what's awesome is that you have sweet ass merch, and one of the coolest things that I've been able to do in recent years is actually have like cool merch with like, you know, leather keychain. Not that I expect everyone to be like, whoa, cool mushroom keychain. I'm sure some people think that they're lame, but your average comic is peddling a like, you know, my butthole is, you know,
don't like, sniff here, and it's a picture of their butthole on a shirt, and then it's got like randythompson.com, randythompsoncomedy.com.
And so it's like, you know, to be able to have art, like actual art as your merch is fucking awesome. But you know, I've been doing these indie tour, like it's going to be a while before I can tour anyway. Gives us enough time to build up this podcast. I don't see any reason why there couldn't, even if this podcast isn't like some fucking crazy, like I already was like, we were already talking about finding a way for you to come on the road with me sometime anyway, because like, you know, we have like, it's easy to, people like what you do, and it's easy to like make extra, you know, it's just a win-win. And we're both good stand-ups, and both in a place where like we wouldn't be like leaving a lot behind to like go off on a tour, and it wouldn't be that hard to set up. I already know how to set it up. I already have all of the connections and everything. And yeah, this would be an easy show to like take on the road.
Yeah,
we like would 2 stand-up sets, and then do like and then sit and do like a live podcast or a Q&A with people, or bring in like a guest in the area or, you know, whatever else.
Yeah, like the guest can do stand up while we roast them afterwards from the panel or something. No, it'd be a perfect format. And like my mind isn't even partially there yet, because here it's still 1 in 3 people have coronavirus, which means that if someone came into my apartment, statistically, they would have it. If, if me and Kat don't have it.
I have like 5-year plans, like always. And so like a new thing happens and I can easily go, oh, here's how I see where that would go. And like a lot of the things don't work out, but you know, then you form like a new model and whatnot and like go toward that. This is like for an entry point, this is like just knowing that things could happen down the line if people enjoy this, that we could do a live tour so people could see.
Yeah, I thought it'd be funny because things kind of work out like this sometimes, where the project that you don't think is going to be the one that does the best is the one that does the best. So I thought it'd be funny what if this becomes like our main thing, but our other things aren't as big.
I think it checks. I think it just checks a lot of the boxes of what we do, and it gets like you stop me from like blabbing for too long, getting too wrapped up in the thing, and like interrupt and do impressions and say funny shit.
Damn right. And I stop you from, and I stop there being a coherent train of thought.
And you stop a coherent train of thought from happening, and that's perfect. And yeah, so anyhow, it's just it's a good balance. But and then I had 2 images from this spring to my head. One is like I was thinking about the as we start wrapping up probably.
Oh yeah, we're almost 2 hours, right? Let's keep this one under 2. Oh, we're at 2 hours.
We're at 2 hours. So
yeah,
we're
just say that
up.
thought. I'll say a closing thought, and then we'll be good.
I'll talk to you about this afterwards, but I was it would be fun if sometimes some of like your art was inspired by some of this too, because it might help come up with ideas. No, like no pressure, but that might be I don't know. Anyway, I was thinking of when you talked about the McRib, I was thinking about like seeing a Big Bang and like the McRib coming out, but also like seeing a parallel universe where like the MacRib comes out, or you know, like the multiple
as opposed to the McRib.
Yeah, where it's just like slightly different. You know, if the Big Bang goes like. Something like the McRib was always destined to happen, but there's like different parallel universes where it's just like a rib mac or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
One more time. I think Yosh disrupted the feed. It has the power to stop the internet sometimes.
Yeah, I did see that. So it's basically just that the difference between my point of view and your point of view is like a sliver. You think like the McRib was always going to be. I think that there's like slight variations that got selected for, and something like the McRib was always going to happen within this universe, but not exact. Like by like the first stable elements were the foundation for everything. By the very nature that they were the first stable, there were plenty of unstable elements. There's no reason why elements can't be unstable. You just don't see them because they're unstable. So you're never going to be able to observe them. But it wasn't like exactly destined to be, you know.
I like that. I get down with that too, and it makes me think about low-hanging fruit and how sometimes it is an idea's time and it hasn't been uncovered yet and someone figures it out later. I think Jimmy Page or someone was talking about Jack White, the guitarist, and you know that one riff from one of the first White Stripe songs, the one that's like like that's such an easy, obvious riff, but no one had come up with it until then. So it was floating there, but it could have been come up with like 40 years ago, but no one had quite like just stumbled upon it. But he pulled it out of the air like, oh, you guys missed this easy riff. And everyone's like, oh, fuck, of course. But of course.
In Deltron 3030, Del the Funky Homo Sapien, I think on their first album, he has a lyric that's like, that's about like people don't make music, they articulate the music that like that already exists within the universe. They
articulate music liking to the music, and I can't even do it right. Me and my friend used to do this character, like just not for anyone in particular, just when we were being idiots. And the character, as I'm sure you're about to guess, is Del the Funky Homosexual. And it's just like Del, but he just loves talking about dicks up his ass and like putting his dick in other guys' asses or whatever the cartoon.
I bet he has sweet flow while doing it too.
Sticking my dick in an asshole, rubbing it on my eyeballs. If you want to see what I've seen.
And then I was thinking this conversation
on another fool's large penis.
I'm going to stop you very soon. I will mute you. So there's to articulate the idea of like meaning the way that I was like trying to capture it, and I think like we're both kind of in the ballpark of thinking about it. I picture like a person walking toward a thing, or two people walking toward the same like objective reality. And one person is seeing a void and another person is seeing like a bouquet, you know, like a beautiful garden of like hope and promises and all that. But they're both going toward the exact same thing. It's just like, it's a drive. Like one person is like, oh, there's no hope. Look, I'm going to walk over there to point out how much there void of hope there is. And another person's like, it's full of wonder, but they're going to like the exact same spot.
It's the same. It's the same spot which emerges from it, man.
I don't know. So yeah. So I think this is a great time. With that, I think this is a great time to wrap up with our best catchphrase in all of podcasting.
Yeah. So everybody, thanks for listening, and keep salivating, honey.
What, did we land on keep salivating, honey, or was it keep them salivating, or was it we had this conversation last time
keep
too.
Salivating Barbara?
No, it was just if there was another word in there or not. I abandoned the Barbara idea once I
keep on salivating. That's it.
Keep on salivating.
Because there's keep on keeping on. Keep on salivating, doggies.
Ding. Ding.
Thanks for listening to episode 1 of Mind Under Matter. Tune in next episode where we talk about habit forming, motivation, and how we can do stuff instead of just sitting in bed and not doing stuff all the time. So keep listening as we become more structured, more focused, and more unfocused as we uncover everything on the podcast. And if you're not getting enough, be sure to check out our Patreon at MindUnderPod. That's patreon.com/MindUnderPod. You'll get access to bonus episodes, and you'll get access to an entirely new show called Mind Under Art, where Shane talks to me about art that I've made and what I was thinking when I made it. Send your questions, join the community, have a blast. Any last words, Shane?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to passively listen and enjoy things. It's another to be active, to get to participate, to get to give us direction, to give us suggestions for topics that you want to hear more about, to tell us your favorite pieces of Ramin that you want to know the story behind. And Patreon is the way to do that, and it supports the show. But make sure and subscribe, like, all those things. Writing a nice review helps us out, helps out those algorithms and everything else. Obviously, we're brand spanking new, but we've already recorded a bunch. I think this is an incredible podcast that I'm so thrilled to be sharing with you guys. So I hope you share in our excitement.
This is the way. Shane doesn't watch Mandalorian yet.
I do, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. And that's Mind Under Pod. That's patreon.com/mindunderpod. You're supposed to repeat the URL 7 times for maximum salience. Maximum salience. Maximum salience. Mind Under Pod.